Today we have a special guest. He is a nutritional scientist, Dr. Ryan Yamka, if I spell it right.
You did. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your nutritional background.
Yeah, it's actually fairly extensive and expensive. I jokingly refer to it what could have been my lake house in Maine, but it went towards college tuition. I have 2 bachelor degrees from Virginia Tech, one in animal science and one in biology. I actually went to University of Kentucky to study companion animal nutrition. I did my master's and PhD there, and I was actually doing research for Hill's Pet Nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
When I left college, I went to Hill's Pet Nutrition. I was there for about 8 years. I ended up launching a few products there and many patents, but I bounced back and forth between research and development and product development. The difference there is concept to shelf. From there, I got my MBA at Baker University because I wanted to know, those crazy acronyms that business people used. And then I also went and got certified as a professional animal scientist and later board certified with the American College of Animal Sciences and later became a fellow with the American College of Nutrition. So expensive wallpaper.
Well, basically, you haven't left anything out of what you can study around dog nutrition. This is correct.
Correct. And more importantly, I like to do comparative nutrition because there's lots of applications from human nutrition to pet. And also there are some things that don't overlap where you need to be cognizant of what might be good for a dog is not good for a cat. What might be good for a human is not good for a dog.
Right. That's actually my kind of question that pops up right in my head. We always try, we say dogs are our best friends and dogs are family. And so we want to feed them like family or like best friends. So there's always the question, what is the right food for a dog? So my first thing that comes up as a question is, are dogs carnivores or omnivores, or what exactly are they?
Yeah, technically they're classified as carnivores, but if you actually look at their behavior and habits, they're actually omnivores. Even if you look at wolves' behaviors and studies and what they've published, most of the time what you actually see is they're opportunistic. And regardless of what part in the world they go back into, it could be Eastern Europe, it could be Canada, it could be US. But if they're looking at scat, even in wolves, they'll find berries and figs and plant material in it. And obviously when they can, they'll get a deer or what have you. But even when they do track and hunt deer, first thing they usually eat is the entrails, which is going to have a lot of that fiber and stuff in there in various states of digestion. So when you look at dogs, and University of Illinois has done a lot of extensive research, especially in the early and late 90s, they still do. They're able to show you positive benefits of things like soluble fiber and total dietary fiber, as well as insoluble fiber. There's benefits for that, but they can show how they can change the microbiota or your gut micros to be in a healthier state, if you will. And actually a lot of the things that they see are actually pretty similar to humans, although their digestive tract may vary in length. They see a lot of similar benefits to them. And also you'll see there's benefits to things like probiotics and things of that nature as well. So it's not only just fiber or prebiotic feeding the good micros, but you could also be adding the good micros. And put it in simple terms, most people think of yogurt when you think of probiotics.
Right. Well, I'm Greek as a nationality, Greek Austrian. So we have a yogurt, like the Greek yogurt with all these natural life cultures probiotics. Like you leave the doctor with a prescription and you basically on your way back, you grab a yogurt.
Absolutely.
So I see from a dog behavior perspective that food does have a huge impact on a dog's behavior. For example, a dog who is starving on nutrition is most likely to go into trouble, like digging your garbage bin or supplement his lack of nutrition in neighbors' poop dogs or grassing from the yard or going through a garbage. As you said very well, and I think it matches what I have looked like in the past, that dogs are opportunistic scavenging predators And so I think I read some studies down in Africa about how wild dogs live, and they basically feed from environmental garbage, and they supplement with kind of live hunting when they need some extra additional proteins. So the question is, we have these predators in our house, and we want to give them the best value of nutrition. Now, we hear on one side that raw is dangerous for humans in a household, and on the other side, we read that kibble create cancer to dogs, and then we say, well, it's totally confusing out there. I don't know if it's purposely confusing or there's a thought behind it. What is real healthy for dogs, and is there something that's in between that we actually missed?
Yeah, so that's a short question, but there's a long answer.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate thing is, especially in the day of the internet, there's a lot of noise. You have self-proclaimed experts, but when you peel back that onion, they're not experts. And a great example is you'll find smaller pet food companies that say they have a nutritionist, and then you ask, okay, what are your credentials? And they're not. They're really food formulators. So they're following a recipe, if you will, right?
Right.
And the recipe is, I need to take these ingredients to hit these nutritional levels. They might not know the interaction of certain ingredients with other ones or processing, things of that nature. So you got to be careful with stuff like that. When it comes to raw food, really the crux of it comes down to bacteria levels, right? Every time you see it, it's usually Clostridia, E. coli, Listeria, or Salmonella. I think, it doesn't take rocket science to know that's present in raw meat. That's why we cook it, right? But in the case of dogs, where they may not, or cats may not actually get sick, they can still become carriers of it. And
Correct.
so when you think of it, and let me take a step back. If you look at pet food in general and how it's regulated, it's actually regulated a lot harder than human food, right? If you find salmonella, you have a recall. When we had the romaine lettuce outbreak with the CDC and all of these people getting sick, there was never a recall, right? With the turkey, there was never a recall. But the two dog foods that they talk about in the paper, they were actually recalled in the state of Minnesota.
Right. And they actually were shipped, right? They were shipped to the class. They weren't fresh.
Exactly. And so when you get into that, what they're looking at isn't necessarily the health of the animal, which they are, but they're also looking at the health of the people that are interacting with that food for that animal. And so they err at a different level of caution. And if you think about it, I always joke about that if you have more kids, more than one kid, most people get it. The first kid you have, you're putting in you're plugging all the plugs, and you got the gate across the stairs, everything else. With the second kid, he or she's usually crawling on the floor and has the piece of rawhide or a dog toy in his mouth. Right? Would have never done that with the first kid.
Right.
And with the third kid, who knows what they're doing? And I say that from experience, but that's what they're really looking for. And so when you get in those situations and people aren't properly cleaning the bowls and they're not properly cleaning their hands after they clean up after their dog, you run the same risks as if you were running a restaurant, right? You don't use the same cutting board to cut and knife for chicken as you do for broccoli. If you are going to, you chop the broccoli first and then you do the chicken.
Right.
You don't want that cross contamination, and that's really where it comes from. Sometimes, and most people tell you that you haven't seen any animals die from eating contaminated raw food. That's no longer the case anymore. There has been instances of it, but again, that comes down to pathogen control and how fresh your meat is. The longer that meat sits around, the more the bacteria grows.
Right.
And so, that those are things to consider as well. And I think many a times when you see, and depending on the reputation of the company, you'll know if they have a good, track record or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That's very enlightening.
Now, in regard to the question about kibble and cancer, I'd say a lot of that stems back from the days when they were using artificial preservatives, where they were using ethoxyquin, BHA, BHT. That wasn't shown to happen in dogs and cats. In fact, if you look at some of the products we eat today, you might even find a BHA or BHT in it if you actually paid attention to it. So we don't practice what we preach for our animals necessarily, especially if the product tastes good. But what they did was back then they ran studies and showed that it was potentially carcinogenic in mice and other lab animals, but they were at doses that were ridiculously high. The industry responded to the consumer demands and they replaced it with things like mixed tocopherols or green tea. So from that standpoint, they evolved just like the consumer wanted them to, but unfortunately, you still have the squeaky wheels out there that, it's unfortunate, but, perception is reality. And that's part of the things that companies have to live with. So it's no longer, I'll call it an intellectual discussion, more of an emotional discussion.
Gotcha.
This day and age, people are very passionate about their pets. I think that's clear in what they're spending, not only for food, but for vet care and outfits and beds and bowls and everything else.
It goes beyond $6 billion right now, right?
Yeah. And when you look at it that way, people, I mean, for argument's sake, they're kids, especially to the millennial generation who are waiting to have families and things of that nature. And if they believe they're doing the best for that animal, it's hard to have that true scientific conversation that you would have had 20, 30 years ago.
Right. So let me ask you a question about food qualities. So the raw aspect is very clear, and I just want to add that feeding raw doesn't mean we feed raw. There are different approaches of, ways to feed depending on the ideas of what dogs are and where they're coming from. So you have this full prey diet, and you have other types of diets. I personally prefer raw feeding by adding vegetables and honey and yogurt and berries and molasses and, nice bright variety based on the breed that I have. If I would have a husky, I would get more into kind of breed specific diet rather than species appropriate diet that's kind of out there in the market. However, since I moved in my new house, my process of having abilities to serve raw diet is kind of down to the minimum because my house is very small. I don't fit it separate refrigerator, so I cannot have food separated in my house,
Sure.
Which forced me to go in a high quality kibble. My next question will be, what is a healthy kibble and what should we look for? And considering there are different types of processing methods, what is your take on that? What should somebody look for?
Yeah, sure. So, when I'm looking for foods or recommending foods, I want to know, is there good food safety and quality assurance going in there? If you're constantly seeing them in the paper for doing something wrong, that's usually a bad indication. Not every, if somebody says, hey, if they ever had a recall, they're a bad food. No, that's not the case. I mean, the reality of it is everybody has them. The question is what's the frequency? And you don't want the frequency to be high.
Right.
And the responsible companies will have the recalls or the withdrawals because it's in the best interest and they pull the product back.
Mm-hmm.
When you see a forced recall, frankly, I wouldn't feed that animal because that means they were fighting with the FDA and FDA finally said, enough's enough, we're pulling the product. So that would be number one. Number two, it really comes down to there's lots of good kibble out there. And it comes down to what is your lifestyle and consumer preference. I can tell you that there's one or two breeds that have gluten sensitivities, and
I'm one of those.
and a lot, and then there's some that pop up randomly. But to have an over-the-counter gluten-free product to make claims on it, is really goofy, right? But the reality of it is there's lots of people now in the world that are being identified with celiac disease. And so they want to live the gluten-free lifestyle and push it over to their dogs. And so what they do is eliminate gluten in their house altogether. And so they'll pass it on, and how they behave as the individuals, they generally pass on to themselves or their animals. And then the other side of it is price point. You know, what can you afford to pay? And that's where, you know, when I say I'm a non-denominational nutritionist, I don't go based off of ingredients. I go based off of nutrition, right? So I want to look for, does that product have antioxidants in there, right? Antioxidants are good. If you're doubting the quality of a cheaper food, well, look and see if they did AFCO feeding trials, because they have to pass that, and that shows the health of the animal and everything else. But there's good foods at each price point. But generally speaking, the more information they put on that label from a guarantee, the more comfortable I feel feeding that food. Now, I have the insider information of knowing, you know, who makes what and things like that. But, you know, I also know the values of certain things. So I'm going to look for, are they guaranteeing omega-6s and omega-3s? Are they guaranteeing vitamin E? Are they guaranteeing vitamin C? And things of that nature. Do they go just beyond the traditional protein, fat, and ash and moisture? And that's when people are doing that, that's usually indicative that they know what they're doing. And a lot of the companies that have been around for decades, in some cases hundreds of years, obviously they've put a lot of time, research, and effort into what they're doing, so they know what they're doing from a nutritional standpoint.
Let me ask you a question in regards to resources and feeding trials. How many dogs does this trial include, and how long does this trial last?
Yeah, so that's the one that, you know, I get kind of squeamish on, and saying that isn't the only way you should look at the food. Because an AFCO trial, generally you start out with 8 dogs or cats for a maintenance study. And obviously there's different requirements for growth and stuff. I'll focus on maintenance. Maintenance, they look at 8 animals, 6 have to make it through the trial. Obviously the 2 that leave, it can't be from nutritional deficiencies, but it can be for other reasons, right? Poor intake or what have you. But what they simply measure is they look at body weight. Are they maintaining body weight? And then they look at maybe 5 blood parameters, and I would argue are meaningless in this day and age, especially if it's a group of animals that go through the testing all the time.
Right.
Because if that dog was on products like prior to that had, let's say, vitamin E, for example, in there, I haven't seen any study out there published that says, you know what, it takes you a year and a half to get back down to vitamin E levels where all of a sudden you could be back in deficiency status.
Right.
And so obviously things like vitamin E and other nutrients that you could store in fat, if you're maintaining the fat, it's really hard to see where those deficiencies or toxicities could pop up, but more importantly, deficiencies. Do I think that, you know, companies could do better jobs with it and analyze more things? Sure. But at the same time, the companies that are out there and a lot of the published research that there is to date, I'm a big advocate for animal welfare. So I'm not a proponent of running a study for a study's sake.
Correct.
What I would do and what I would suggest is ask your company, do they have digestibility data on that food? Because not only does that tell you, hey, they're formulating the meat in AFCO, but if the digestibility data is high, generally you're not going to have anything to worry about.
Right.
And if you look at how they calculate energy and atwater and things like that, usually they're assuming 80% digestibility for protein, 90% fat, and 70 for carbs. So for argument's sake, 80% on average is what atwater predicts. Now, if something is below that, well, then you should be concerned. Because what you think you're getting may not be what you're getting.
I understand. Well, it's very clear that for marketing purposes, the ingredients list is very, very complicated. So you have to do literally mathematical calculations to figure out what is what exactly. Everybody presents different to look better. So from my understanding, dogs live on 0 carbs with no problems. But when we need dog food, we see a lot of carbs in there, basically cereal. And coming from a food industry, I would say there's a lot of food leftovers from these food conglomerates that end up in the dog food for recycling purposes. What do you think is going on there?
Well, it would depend on the company and how they're resource or sourcing their ingredients. But lots of times, if you see people, bigger companies that are ordering corn or wheat or soy, they're getting it no different than a human supplier would be. I mean, it's coming in on a big truck, it's going on a conveyor, it's going in a silo, like you would see at a farm. So from that standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. And
are there other regulations on the quality of the incoming ingredients? Is there
there will be. The unfortunate thing is how robust is their system, and are they living to it?
Right.
I think a great example of that is the current criminal case that's going on in St. Louis right now with about the feather meal being hydrolyzed and cut into the chicken meal. Right there, you had a Texas state regulator involved. You had maybe two or three other companies involved. And so the unfortunate thing is when there's an ability for food fraud for financial gain, unfortunately, people are going to expose it.
Right.
My dad was a Port Authority police officer and 9/11 first responder, and he always told me, you're not a thief until you're given an opportunity to become a thief. In other words, is there something there you can take that you really want, and it's and nobody's looking. I know that oversimplifies it, but that's the unfortunate thing. But most companies that are out there, they're adhering to FDA and Food Safety Modernization Act standards. They're going to be out there doing environmental swabbing to make sure their plants are clean. If they're using corn, they're testing to make sure the aflatoxin levels are low. And they will reject what we refer to in the industry hot loads. So corn that comes in with higher levels. If they're pulling in wheat and stuff like that, they'll be doing that in mycotoxins. So they'll be testing for the right things. And usually when you start getting into some of those premium foods, that's what you're paying for. Because obviously they're developing a very good food safety program, and they're doing it to give you peace of mind.
Gotcha. So I'm the one who complains about dog food and kibbles, and I'm kind of like reading the small details. And the reason why I started following you on LinkedIn was because I like the way you described things. It wasn't like the bad guys and the good guys. It was like, these are the facts. This is how it goes. Have discernment about what you're reading. Like, understand what you're doing, kind of thing. And I was like, you know what? That's an accurate source of information, right there. And so I looked at your resume and I was like, wow, he walks on heels. I'm not complaining about that, but you made your way, kind of, from my understanding, into the smaller boutique companies. And since you are also a nutritional advisor, many companies come to you and says, hey, we want to launch a product, we need some help. And you kind of step into that project, having all this experience over the years and the nutritional science background. They cannot fool you around here. Says, you do. I guess that's what you get. The question is, actually not the question. We have a similar friend here, and I see you work with Earth Animal, which actually was the reason why I start looking into healthy nutrition, because the Goldstein family was actually next door when I lived in Connecticut, and we actually showed together the same event, and we got to become friends. So when I work with rescues, I basically called them and says, hey, I have 3 rescues going on here. They really are a mess. Can you help me a little bit nutritional? He's like, okay, let me check in on that. So we had that kind of conversation, and their shop became bigger and bigger to the point that at some point we had a conversation of helping them advertising the products in different pet shops. Didn't work out back then, but time changes. So
Sure.
seeing you there, I was like, awesome, we have an insight man. So you guys launching a new product line. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're launching a new pet food called Wisdom. We really, when they brought me on, they wanted to know what's the best way to go about doing it. We identified a plant that they're very good people there. They know what they're doing. They were organic certified, so their documentation is very good. And actually, Earth Animal purchased the plant, majority stake, and we're in the process of building it out to make the Wisdom product. So we control everything ourselves, from ingredient buying to finished product to leaving the store or the manufacturing facility. As part of that, as you know from Dr. Bob and Susan, they were one of the first natural pet stores in the U.S., if not the first. But
35 years back, right? If I remember right.
Yeah. And they're very entrenched in holistic, natural nutrition. And so what we're doing, and I always say my role is, as an R&D and product development person, is to make marketing people or dreams reality on a shelf. And so they brought me on to help them launch Wisdom. It's going to be it'll be unique to the pet food industry in the sense that what you see on the bag will actually be dry weights of or dry ingredient order. So when you look at it, that product will be 70% dry meat. So as you know, and others know, when you put that in kibble, you usually only recover a third of it, if you will, right? But with us, you'll actually see it's shreds of meat. There's nothing else in that meat. And so you'll see chicken and turkey. And then what we did was we actually went out and we got identified suppliers, Canada and the US, for organic blueberries and broccoli and stuff like that that's already dried and preserved the proper way. And we even got down to the point of taste testing all of it. Some of them, depending on how they were preserved naturally, like what you would find in Whole Foods and stuff like that, some of them would have that raisin or sugary taste. And obviously I didn't want a cranberry and a blueberry taste in the same. And right. So we did, around the table, try it, and do you like it a bit? And then the last component, and so that'll be about 10% of the food, is that fruit mixture and veggie mixture. It'll contain broccoli, carrots, sweet potatoes, apples, blueberries, cranberries, and I'm sure I'm missing something, but you'll see it. It's colorful.
I started drooling already on that one.
And more importantly, it's not label dressing. You actually see it in the product, and so we're adding it as diced pieces or actual whole blueberries, which is very cool. And the last component is his Vitality Cube, and that's where he puts his.
I have them in the shelf. Yep.
That's where you'll see his sprouted, seeds in there. You'll also see natural fruits in there to supplement some vitamins. You also see traditional proteinates and things of that nature in there. So think of like a Centrum, vitamin that you take. And then, there's some other goodies in there like flaxseed and, garbanzo beans. Obviously, you got to get your omega-3s in there somehow.
Right. How do you guys stick it together to a kibble?
So so when we make that Vitality Cube, it's actually it'll be formed the same way or similar to what our meat is, and it's in essence it'll be baked at a low temperature. not different than what we're doing to the meat. So it doesn't go through high pressure, high extrusion like a kibble does, or even what a canned food does. Think about it more as if you were drying out meat in your oven where you set it at a low temperature and it takes a long time to dry it out, versus you just nuking it right away.
Right.
And so the way we'll do it is we go to the kill step, which is certain temperature, certain humidity on proprietary technology that we have. And then from there, we drop it down and dry it out. And then obviously we, once everything cools down, we'll blend the meat with the fruits and veggies and the vitality cubes into the product. And the more important thing is, we've affectionately called it the wisdom window on our bags, but we're putting a window on the bag so you can actually see it. So you don't have to trust me that, hey, because blueberries on the label, it's whatever. If you want to sit there and count them, you can count them.
Right. So in other words, it will be kind of like a salami thing, or will be a bag? Is it dry food or is it semi?
It'll be a bag. So what you'll see is shredded meat blended with whole fruits and veggies, blended with the little cubes. So it's literally looks like shredded meat.
Gotcha.
And if you go to our website, you should be able to see prototypes of it, which we've been able to reproduce over and over again. And more importantly, on the initial testings that we've done, digestibility was at 88% on average.
I'm signing up for the test run.
And as you know, Dr. Bob and Susan, we don't test on lab animals, so that's actually in people's homes,
right.
With everyday animals. So it's that's part of their ethos, and they honor it, live by it, and they don't believe in factory farming and things of that nature.
I can confirm that.
You'll actually see that on our bags, and we're going through the efforts of doing it with the Global Animal Partnership. We're actually using gap-raised turkey and gap-raised chicken, and we'll actually have the logo on the bags for launch. And in addition to that, obviously, they go after their sustainability mission. And we've partnered with a bag company that is part of the Pet Sustainability Coalition. But more importantly, we've also partnered with TerraCycle, and TerraCycle upcycles scrap bags from production runs into things that can be usable, whether it's park benches or even business card holders. So you can imagine what they make. And then also we partnered with them to do a recycling program, because most bags in the marketplace can't be recycled, usually because of the film or because of how much ink is going into it. But with the TerraCycle program, if you go onto our website, you can print up prepaid postage and send in the bag to them. And that's part of our program as well.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been kind of fun.
Yeah.
And definitely outside of the box thinking. And then obviously, as you know, we have the holistic supplements and things online. And also they came out, and we're starting to sell the natural flea and tick remedies. They actually, besides the internal powders and sprays, they actually have a collar as well as a spot on as well now. And so, we're pushing those now as well. So yeah, it's been some fun times, and those that go to the trade shows can, if you remember Bob and Susan being back there in the day, the booth was a lot smaller and it's getting bigger. But they're still true to their roots, and that's what makes it fun. They haven't let the success go to them. They really, really, really do. And as you know, they are genuine people.
They are.
And they do what they say, and they say what they do. And it's not there for just to make people feel warm and fuzzy. It's they genuinely do it.
And I remember the idea is almost 10 years old. Starting.
You're correct.
It had several hiccups, and I remember back then we were like in Greenwich Beach. It was an event about pet or paws, whatever. We literally had a stand. They were selling the book, and I was selling my holistic dog services. And I was like, "Hey, you guys holistic too?" And like, let's chat. So it started. It was, I think, in 2000. 2007 or 2009. So I think it was 2009 if I remember right. So almost 10
Yeah.
years back.
Yeah, they said they've been working on it for about 10 years now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I told them it's time to stop working on it and time to get it out there. So
Well, you need a good team.
yeah,
You cannot have a good product with not having good team support. It's kind of having a
absolutely.
good idea, not being able to. I'm coming from a research development from office supplies, and I've been in the food industry as a packaging engineer in Europe. So I've been through the processes of getting things into the shelf from the idea.
Sure.
So I know exactly what you're going through and all those difficulties are coming, and I really appreciate you actually having time to talk to me about today.
Anytime. Anytime.
Whew, we talked a lot. I don't think I missed anything. Did I miss anything? No.
I don't know. If you did, we can definitely have another conversation.
Right, definitely would do so. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
No
How
problem.
how can people get to Earth Animals' new Wisdom dog food? Is this available in the market, or when are you guys are launching?
Yeah, so we'll be launching at end of the year,
Okay.
and they'll start showing up in independent pet stores towards the end of the year, and obviously we'll go more and more national as we start doing pipeline fill and all that good stuff. For those people that feed a raw food and they're looking for something to help balance it from a mineral and vitamin standpoint, we sell our daily raw online on Earth Animal. And then also the flea and tick and the herbal remedies, they can also get online, or they can also get it at their local pet store. But if they can't find it there, they can certainly get it online at earthanimal.com.
Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. Wow. I actually changed my attitude about dog food after a conversation because I just don't trust anybody out there. And so,
Yeah, you got to separate marketing from reality.
right,
And
right.
unfortunately, in this day and age where it's easy for people to get online and say what they want to say, and especially with social media marketing, it's pretty easy to influence or get in people's head, and they believe it becomes gospel. When you ask for where's the data, and generally there's no data to support it.
Awesome. Can people reach out to you in person? Do you kind of consult people for the dog stuff, or is it something that Earth Animal does?
Or obviously, we can do it through. We have a solution finder on earthanimal.com, so you can step through that if you think you have a problem, and we potentially have a solution. I always recommend that people go to the veterinarian first, especially when it comes to serious things of sicknesses, illnesses, and things of that nature, or even if they have concerns about a food. They can certainly go have that conversation with them. If they're wanting to learn things about, labels or how do I read this or that or the other thing, I don't mind answering emails like that. In fact, if they look at a few of my blogs on Pet Food Industry magazine, they can see that I've done a series of about 14 or 15 of them now, debunking myths and misconceptions.
That's how I met you, actually.
Yeah, and so that helps guide them. What's a real claim versus a bogus claim, so they can help separate some of the puffery from reality. So there's lots of methods to get through to me, and obviously they can connect via LinkedIn or through my Luna Science and Nutrition account. Sure.
I feel some people get very frustrated when I'm telling them you cannot just feed your dog chicken and rice.
Yep. They need to, the best way to convey the message to them that I've found is you have to put it in terms that kind of overwhelms them, but they understand it. And, they're feeding dogs and cats no different than you would feed a baby, newborn infant, right? And that newborn infant has to rely on the mother's milk or the formula for its sole source of nutrition. If that baby has a craving for salt, it can't open a cupboard and eat some potato chips. Well, a dog and a cat are very much the same way.
Correct.
And so if you don't provide the proper nutrition in that food when they're feeding it, and to your point, just chicken and rice, right? We all know you're going to be missing out on certain minerals and vitamins and things of that nature. that's where it becomes important to, you know, blend in something like a daily raw that's there to complement that lifestyle if you choose to go that way. And that's why, you know, when I talk that I'm non-denominational, I believe in everybody's right to feed how they want to feed, as long as they feed it the correct way.
You know, surviving is not mean thriving. So they may survive your
thrive.
food, but they don't survive long term.
Exactly. And it goes down to, you don't want longevity, you want longevity and quality of life.
Right.
Because if they're around and hurting, they're just there for your sake, not for their sake. Now, if they're having good quality life and living long, well, that's better, because then everybody's happy.
Yeah. Awesome. Dr. Ryan, I really appreciate your time today. I can just, wow, so much information going on here. And actually, it's information that's actually digestible. A good digestibility of information. So we're not overwhelmed with information we cannot process. So perfect. I think we should do another meeting at some point and talk about how can people who don't want to go the commercial route, they want just to cook their own food or produce their own food for different reasons, financially usually. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it. Have a great day and looking forward for our next appointment.
Absolutely. Talk to you later, Ron.
Bye-bye. Thank you.